Riftwalkers Radio is waiting for you.
Just step through the rift
and discover a world of fantasy like you've never heard before. Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Always.
Today, we're sailing off to the land of Vikings.
Vikings.
But we're not just talking about raids and longships.
No.
We're diving into something that terrified even the fiercest Viking warriors.
Oh, do tell?
We're talking about cider, a powerful form of Norse magic.
Cider. A fascinating and complex subject.
So imagine a world where spirits are everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, like in the forests, in the trees, influencing every decision you make.
That sounds like a lot of pressure.
That was everyday life for the Vikings.
Living in constant awareness of the spiritual realm. I see.
So how did they handle that? Did they just try not to make the spirits angry?
Well, they definitely tried to keep things balanced. They believed that harmony between the physical and spiritual worlds was essential.
Makes sense.
Rituals and offerings were a big part of their lives.
Okay, so where does cider fit into all of this?
Cider was a way to tap into the very essence of the universe.
Wow, okay, hold on. What does that even mean?
Think of it like channeling the energy of the earth, the stars, even the aurora borealis.
That sounds pretty intense.
It was a profound connection to the cosmos.
And what could they do with this connection?
Well, the practitioners, who were called Shamans and Seers, could do some pretty amazing things.
Like what? Give me some examples.
They could see the future, heal the sick, and even control the weather.
Wow, that's a pretty impressive resume.
They were individuals who dedicated their lives to understanding and manipulating these unseen forces.
Okay, so we're talking about real power here, not just some parlor tricks.
Exactly. Cider was a force to be reckoned with, and that's what made it so fascinating and, for some, terrifying.
I bet. So who were these powerful figures who could wield this cider?
They were called vulvas, or seeresses.
Vulvas.
They were the ones who mastered cider, particularly divination, healing, and manipulating the natural world.
Okay, so imagine a vulva calming a raging storm at sea.
Or using herbs and rituals to heal a wounded warrior. Their power was undeniable.
I can see why they'd be both respected and feared. What role did they play in Viking society?
It's complex. They weren't just witches on the fringes of society.
No.
They were highly respected, often advising kings and chieftains.
Wow, so even the toughest Viking leaders would consult these vulvas.
Absolutely. Their ability to foresee the future and connect with the spiritual world made them essential in matters of war, politics, even just keeping the community safe and healthy.
So they were like the wise women of the tribe, the oracles everyone turned to for guidance.
Precisely.
I can see how that would give them a lot of influence, but also kind of scary. Imagine knowing they could potentially see your future.
Oh, certainly. The Vikings had a complicated relationship with the Valets.
Complicated how?
Well, they revered their wisdom and power, but they also knew that cider could be used for good or for evil.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, you'd be happy if a vulva healed your sick child, but what if you accidentally offended her? Would she curse you or something?
The duality of cider, that ability to heal or harm, definitely added to the mystique and the apprehension surrounding these women.
It sounds like they walked the fine line between light and darkness.
They did, and that made them both fascinating and a little terrifying.
So we've got these powerful vulvas wielding cider, capable of incredible feats, but also feared for their potential for darkness. But I'm curious about the practical side of things. What did it actually involve to practice cider?
That's a great question. It wasn't just chanting spells or mixing potions. Cider was about tapping into a primal cosmic energy.
Okay, so they were channeling the power of the universe.
Exactly. And to do that, they'd enter trance-like states, often using music, chanting, and ritual movements.
So kind of like a shamanistic practice.
You're right on the mark with that comparison. Cider wasn't just about manipulating external forces. It was about connecting with the deeper currents of existence, the very fabric of reality itself.
Wow, this is getting pretty deep. Before we get too lost in the cosmic currents, let's pause here for a moment.
Take a breath. Let it all sink in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? These people tapping into a power that could literally shape reality.
You mentioned they used runes and staffs. What other tools did they use in their cider practice?
Well, one of the more interesting ones is the distaff.
Distaff.
You know, the tool used to spin wool.
Right. But what does that have to do with magic?
It seems to have been a powerful symbol in cider. Some think it represented the vulva's ability to weave fate, to connect with the threads of destiny.
So it's like their magic was intertwined with their everyday lives.
Exactly. And that reminds me of another important concept in Norse mythology, Weird.
Weird. What's that?
It's this complex web of interconnected events and destinies, and the Volvas believed they could perceive and even influence weird through their cider.
Hold on. They could actually shape the future. That's some serious power.
It is, and that's why the Volvas were treated with so much respect, but also a bit of fear. They could advise on everyday matters, but also potentially change the outcome of battles or political decisions.
Wow. I mean, that makes sense, but it also makes you wonder if there were any rules. Like, was there anything to stop them from abusing that power?
It's hard to say for sure. The sources don't give us a clear answer.
That's interesting.
But we do know there were consequences for misusing cider. Some sagas talk about Volvas being ostracized or even punished for using their powers for selfish reasons or to harm others.
So there were some boundaries, even if they weren't written down somewhere. Do we have any specific examples of how cider might have been used in, say, a battle?
Actually, yes. One of the sources you sent me describes a battle where a Volva used cider to create a thick fog that disoriented the enemy.
Really? Like a magical fog?
It seems so. And her side ended up winning the battle. It really shows how their powers could influence major events.
That's incredible. So cider wasn't just about telling fortunes or healing. It was about real power that could impact entire communities.
It was. And that's what makes it so fascinating to study. It gives us a glimpse into a world where magic wasn't just a story. It was a force to be reckoned with, a power that could shape destinies.
It seems like the Vikings had to find a balance. On one hand, they were fierce warriors, very practical people. But on the other hand, they had this deep respect for these unseen forces in the universe.
Exactly. And the Volvas, with their mastery of cider, kind of embodied that balance. They were a reminder that there were things out there beyond human understanding, powers that could bring both good fortune and terrible misfortune.
And those powers, combined with the Volva's knowledge and skills, made them crucial members of Viking society. It's hard to imagine a Viking chief making any big decision without consulting a Volva first.
I agree. Their insights and their ability to use cider made them invaluable. They were consulted on everything from marriage alliances to when to plant crops.
So cider was used for all sorts of things, big and small.
Right.
Not just the big stuff like battles and politics, but also everyday concerns.
Absolutely. The sources suggest that they were often asked for help with things like finding lost objects, making sure the harvest was good, even protecting homes from evil spirits.
So they were woven into the very fabric of the community.
Yeah.
Not just these distant mystical figures.
That's right. They provided guidance, support, and a link to the unseen forces that shape their world.
And speaking of unseen forces, we've talked about how cider could be used to influence them. But what about the risks? Was there any danger in practicing cider?
Oh, definitely. The sources indicate that cider wasn't something to take lightly.
What do you mean?
Well, it seems like one of the biggest risks was a kind of spiritual backlash. If cider was used the wrong way or with bad intentions, there could be serious consequences.
So it's like you need to know what you're doing, like playing with fire.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And that's why the Volva's training and experience were so important. They weren't just playing around with magic. They were serious practitioners who spent years learning their craft and understanding the intricacies of cider.
They had to, right? We've already talked about how they were both respected and feared.
And that respect and fear was definitely warranted. The sources describe cases where people who tried to practice cider without proper training or who used it for bad purposes suffered some pretty bad consequences.
So it wasn't just about finding the right spell in a book. There was real danger involved. What kind of consequences?
Well, there are stories of people who became mentally unstable, experienced physical illness, or even attracted negative spiritual attention after misusing cider.
That sounds intense. It seems like the Vikings didn't mess around when it came to magic. But I'm still curious about the actual rituals themselves. You mentioned trance states and tools like runes and staffs. What exactly did those practices involve?
That's a great question, and that's where things get really interesting. To really understand the power and the mystery of cider, we need to take a closer look at what the Volvas actually did during their rituals to access and manipulate the unseen forces of their world.
All right, let's do it. I'm ready to dive deeper into the heart of those cider rituals. Okay, so we know that practicing cider was serious business. You had to train for years, understand the spiritual world, and respect the power you were dealing with. But I want to know what it actually looked like. Like, if I could travel back in time, what would I see during a cider ritual?
Okay, picture this. A dimly lit longhouse, the air filled with smoke from the fire and the scent of burning herbs. A group of people huddled together, their faces a mix of anticipation and awe. And at the center of it all is the vulva, preparing to enter a trance.
Wow, I can almost feel the tension in the air. What happens next?
The vulva might start chanting in a low, rhythmic voice, her voice blending with the steady beat of a drum. Maybe she's wearing a special cloak.
Oh, cloak.
Yeah, a ceremonial one, decorated with feathers maybe, or bones or runes, all these powerful symbols.
It sounds like a mix of spiritual ritual and some kind of, like, dramatic performance.
You're right to point that out. It seems like these rituals weren't just about achieving a specific outcome, but also about creating a powerful experience for everyone involved.
Like a combination of religious ceremony and magic show, all in one.
Exactly. And as the ritual goes on, the vulva's chanting might get louder, her movements more fluid, like she's in a trance. She might use a staff or a distaff to direct energy or maybe even cast runes.
Runes, like for fortune telling.
Right, or to influence the flow of weird, remember, that web of destiny.
Right, right. So it wasn't just about chanting words or waving a wand. There was real movement and intention behind what they were doing.
Absolutely. The vulva was actively interacting with the spiritual world, drawing on her years of training, her connection to the cosmos, to make things happen, whether it was healing someone, seeing the future, or even controlling the forces of nature.
It sounds like an incredibly powerful experience for both the vulva and the people watching.
It must have been. We can only imagine what it was really like based on the sources. But one thing is clear. These rituals were incredibly important to the Vikings. They offered a way to connect with the unseen forces that shaped their lives, to ask for guidance, seek protection, even try to influence their fate.
Makes you wonder if any of those practices survive to this day. Maybe somewhere in the remote parts of Scandinavia, hidden away.
That's a question people have been asking for centuries. When Christianity spread through Scandinavia, a lot of these practices were suppressed. But some people believe that pieces of cider might have been passed down secretly, maybe through folk traditions or in isolated communities.
Like a hidden history waiting to be discovered.
Maybe. But even if we've lost those ancient rituals, the stories of the vulvas and their cider still have power. They remind us of a time when the line between the physical and spiritual worlds was blurry, when magic was a real force in people's lives.
I think it's safe to say we've learned a lot from this deep dive. What are your final thoughts?
Cider might be mysterious and a little frightening, but it offers a unique window into how the Vikings saw the world, their beliefs, their relationship with the universe. It reminds us that there are forces out there we may never fully understand, and that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who can connect the worlds we can see with the ones we can't.
Well said. And to our listeners, we hope this journey into the world of Vikings and their magic has sparked your curiosity. Go out and explore, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. There's always more to discover in this vast, mysterious universe.
Until next time.